Kathleen Wynne's Liberal government in Ontario has no respect for property owners and no respect for, indeed, local residents in southwestern Ontario communities. That's been in part why it's been so easy for the government to give the green light to these massive wind farm projects in communities where as many as more than 90% of residents want the community to be an unwilling host for these wind turbines. But still, we have a couple of hand-picked vendors selected by the government to build these massive wind farms. Most of them find themselves in southwestern Ontario. Now, one of these companies is Engie, formerly GDF Suez, which has about tens of thousands of acres worth of wind farms in southwestern Ontario, and many of them around the Chatham, Kent, Essex area. Now, recently, Engie sent out a letter to the property owners on whose land these turbines sit. It's leased, it's not owned by the company. And in this letter, they actually requested that these property owners ban hunting from their own land. These bureaucrats, basically, even though they work for companies, they work for government-funded companies, they go to property owners and they say, we want you to ban hunting on your land. The reason, because apparently hunting creates an unsafe working environment for those whose job it is to maintain or do repairs on these wind turbines. Now, the spokesperson for Engie Canada had responded to a request from the London Free Press about this, and she says there were issues of, quote, grave concern that led to this letter going out. Bonnie Hiltz is her name, and this is what she said. These incidents are of grave concern as they are extremely dangerous for our staff whose work environment requires them to be on site regularly. Now, one of these incidents to which she's referring is actually where a wind turbine was directly damaged by gunfire. Now, this is a terrible event and obviously not appropriate, but this was determined to be an act of vandalism, not a hunting mishap. The other incident of grave concern is that a wind turbine maintenance employee once heard gunshots. I kid you not, that was it. They heard gunshots, and apparently this was a scary or traumatic experience, even though no one was hurt, nothing happened, and there's no evidence that anything illegal or anything that shouldn't have been happening actually occurred. But this is the problem. We have this culture of fear surrounding firearms and hunters where this level of stigmatization, this proclamation that it's just scary to be around them, somehow has transitioned into companies actually requesting that property owners give up their right to allow people to hunt on their property, which, if you're from the city, you might not realize is a really common occurrence in southwestern Ontario and in the country most other places as well. So what do we do with this information? Well, right now, this hasn't become anything that has the force of law. But the reason I'm sharing this story with you is because we need to prevent it from getting to that point. These wind turbine companies have been given a huge gift by the government of Ontario, and this has been done on the backs of Ontario taxpayers and indeed on the backs of Ontario community members in rural communities. Now, if the government starts ceding to them even further, that may mean that the government is threatening these individuals or potentially giving them the fear that they could be in danger. And that's what these wind turbine companies have the power to do. They're paying them thousands of dollars a year. In fact, the money is the only reason that many of them have agreed to let wind turbines be erected. And hunters and anglers have understandably been hugely concerned with this. Hunters may be displaced by what this wind farm company is asking for. That was a comment from Matt DeMille, manager of Fish and Wildlife for the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. Rick Nichols, a Chatham-Kent Progressive Conservative MPP, similarly was quite miffed by this, essentially saying that property owners have already had to put up with enough. Regarding this wind turbine program, this is just one step too far. Farmers and landowners should be able to make their own decisions, and vandals should pay for the price of vandalism, not responsible hunters, Nichols said. Now, if we look at the numbers here, hunters are responsible for 0.001% of all accidents. 0.001% of accident studies have shown when we actually look at this element, which is paling in comparison to other activities even as benign as cycling or horseback riding. And this is because hunters are trained, they're certified. Firearms owners in Canada, very strictly regulated and very well trained. They have to be, because the process to get a firearm in Canada, to get a firearms license, is so difficult, and the government tries to lord it over people's heads that this is not a God-given right in this country. So this means that when we have an energy company, a green energy company that is going out of its way to willfully stigmatize hunters, in the absence of any facts, of any statistics, and in the absence of anything apart from its own little squeamish fear about firearms, this is not an attitude that we can allow to prevail. For the Rebel.media, I'm Andrew Lawton.
Thanks for watching. Click here to never miss a Rebel update. Want even more of the Rebel? Well, click here to become a premium member.